Have you ever come to a platform with a welcome like that music? You know, when you're leaning on an everlasting God, it is hard to be weary, even though every once in a while I want to. My body says to, but we have that umption that doesn't allow it. Have you ever noticed that the Scriptures never references God calling volunteers? Have you ever noticed that? He always calls missionaries. In this room, there is a whole herd of missionaries waiting to go on a journey. And sometimes you send others on a journey. But let me tell you the difference between a volunteer and a missionary. A volunteer, you know, we had some folks that used to wear a button, and it says, "Don't yell at me, I'm only a volunteer." And that's a mindset that you can begin and end on your own efforts. A missionary, on the other hand, is called by God, and you no longer have the option of doing your own thing. You have only the option of following God and obeying Him. You know, back in the early part of this year, I had the idea that Bob Butt, pastor at Moose Jaw, would be needing help. And out of that came several things. Our life group adopted the church, Calvary Baptist in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. We grew together as a group in the life group, but not only that, you all didn't know it, but you were going to be commissioning 4 couples to do a particular mission. You know, we use the term ourselves of going on a mission trip. But I've noticed that when Paul went on a trip, he always went on a missionary journey. You ever notice that? And so I'd like for us to think, as a number of you have already accepted God's call to be missionaries at Lone Rock, that you won't be going on a missionary trip to Lone Rock, but rather on a missionary journey. I use that to emphasize the fact that when you go on a trip, you think of leaving point A to get to point B to do something. But on a journey, you think of the process en route. Does that make sense? I knew you were out there, but I can't see many of you. Literally. But think in terms of, from now on, if you will, just kind of indulge me, a missionary journey as opposed to missionary trip, okay? Now I'd like to start our missionary journey that began actually on May the 14th. The physical journey began, 0600 that day. And there were 4 couples that God called together. That was Randy and Regina Lilly, Ray and Marion Burns, Dick and Jane Jepson, Berletta and I. And you sent us on that journey as sure as the church at Jerusalem may have sent Paul with helpers on his journeys. As we went from Topeka, we got together, and guess what? Ray Burns loves to go to Burger King. And we were looking at our receipts when we got home, and we went to Burger King, I think it was 7 times when we left. No, that was both directions. But we won't go into the details. But anyhow, we grew together as we journeyed. We were riding with Randy and Regina, and they became dear to us simply because we were on a missionary journey, not a trip. Otherwise, we'd have been worrying about, are we there yet? And 1,100 miles is not a quick trip. because we went from here to, started to say Burger King at Holton, Burger King. No. We did use Applebee's at Fargo. Dear pastor that we got acquainted with, he opened his church up to us, Temple Baptist in Fargo, North Dakota. And have you ever called a pastor? We haven't called our pastor this. He's Dude. Pastor Dude. Dude Garrett. He likes to be called Dude. And I still have a hard time calling a pastor Dude. But anyhow, we arrived there. We had a great time in his church with him, getting acquainted. And then the next morning, we got up and made the journey on to the border. We crossed with no events at all, able to be winsome to the Canadian border people. Arrived in Moose Jaw. Now, I've been talking to the folks about the fire escape that needed to be built in Moose Jaw. Verlette and I had the vision of one that we knew was bad at the church, but when we looked into the alleyway where the fire escape was to be built, we saw a door that was 18 feet high. We saw an unfilled platform, a wood support post, a gap of 12 feet, and onto the ground with another flight. And we all looked out that door with a little bit of amazement and said, only God can provide the miracle that will happen. Know that the fire escape, the parts had been laying in the weeds next to the church for 2 years. All the parts to build a fire escape. All the physical labor was at Calvary. You sent us as a missionary team to build a fire escape with God's help. And I have to digress. One early morning, Ray called me, and Ray said, I'm concerned. What are 3 old men and 1 young man going to do to build a fire escape? Now, there was one that was 74, 76, and 77, and then the young one was Randy. And I said, Ray, it will only happen by God's miracle. Didn't know where we were going or what it looked like. But relate to you now. Everything was there and in place. 2 great guys that Norris, Frank, and Ian, who was a florist, were the 2 people that came alongside us the most. But with those 2 people called by God with us and God, we put up a 18-foot tall pole, built a fire escape in 3.5 days. Okay? That wasn't all that was done. We welded together some people that were in Calvary, and that was the part of the missionary effort. You remember Jesus talking in Matthew, I believe it's 28, 18, 19, and 20, and he talks to go taking and all nations, that's Canada, and in particular Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. He says, go and make disciples. Remember that? Pastor had several sermons. He's going to scold you if you don't remember. But and then to baptize and to teach. All of those things happened because of God, not because of us. We just were willing workers and servants to go. And you supported us by your prayers. And I hope you're watching the pictures. Some of that demonstrates some of the things I'm talking about. But the whole point was that a mission was accomplished with a fire escape, but also the ladies got to work with some of the Moose Jaw folks, and they done what they called a flower pot ministry. Ever hear of flower pot ministry? Paint flower pots, not my thing. Plant a flower in it, and go to various organizations that had touched the church and say, hey, the church is interested in you. And they not only got together as the local women, but they also got together as well as the community. We left Moose Jaw and we came home. And I have to tell you, there was a small incident at Ray and Marion getting back into the country. I don't know all the details, but we waited and we waited, and we thought about going back, but we thought that might be the wrong thing to do. 45 minutes later, Ray and Marion, and along with Dick and Jane, caught up with us. And I asked Ray, did you witness and give him a Bible? And he said, no, I didn't think that was the appropriate thing to do at the border. We wanted to get into the U.S., but that was the only incident. Then we got all the way to Holton, and you all had a thunderstorm and a lot of hail on a Saturday. Remember that just a week ago? It took us 45 minutes to get from Holton to Topeka. Now, we were under canopies, but we didn't have patience enough to stay there, so we'd get under another canopy. And then we didn't have patience enough to stay there, and we got under a pine tree. But God brought us home. We had a wonderful time, and all of you participated with us in what was a mission journey, not just a mission trip. You supported us both prayerfully and also monetarily in taking care of the fuel in two vehicles. I just want you to know that. Verletta and I and the rest of the missionary team appreciate what you did, and we appreciated representing you as your missionaries in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, Canada. Thank you.